Non-Kosher Wine Podcast with Dr. Kenny Friedman and Rabbi Yisroel Bernath.
Hello, Kenny. Welcome.
Yisroel, welcome to you. Welcome to our very, very special guest. This is long. I've long waited to finally get the man himself on camera, and we both have. We've talked about this for a long time, but he's a busy man. I'm talking, of course, about Gabriel Geller, Director of PR and Manager of Wine Education for Royal Wine. Welcome. It's great to have you.
Well, it's great to be here, guys. Like you said, Kenny, we've tried to coordinate this for quite a while, and Baruch Hashem, I remember listening to your very first podcast. I was driving in Manhattan, and I think it was like hours at the most after you released the first episode. It was exciting.
Well, I should say that Gabriel has been an advisor in many ways to me over the years and to our podcast. That Yisroel and I both bounce ideas off of him, and of course he gives me good feedback as well. I think the two people that I really look to their feedback and to their opinion is Gabriel and Adam Montefiore, of course, who both listen to our podcast. I'm very honored by both of you, and but it means a lot when that you listen and that you have been there since the beginning. So it's special and a special treat for us to have you on.
Well, having my name in the same sentence as Adam Montefiore is very flattering.
Well, I think it's I think deservedly so. And he's an icon to me, and we'll have him on here eventually.
Big time. Oh, for sure. You have to.
I know,
and I'm sure you'll be happy to as well.
Sure, he's told me, but I think you are a legend yourself, and I know a lot of people will look up to you. So we don't have any specific plan as with most of our podcasts, but we just want to shoot the breeze.
That's the best way.
Yeah, I agree. I think for us that works.
Yeah.
And that was when Yisroel approached me, and it was at a KFWE, I think a year ago. When did
a year ago? A little over a year ago.
A little over a year ago. And it seems like only yesterday. And he approached me with the idea. It was very much the idea. It's the Seinfeld of wine podcasts, is that there's no script. That there's no plot to this. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about how you got into this position? You could do
Sure.
I know, because it's really a 10-minute story. You could condense it.
Yeah, I'm gonna condense it quite a bit.
Yes.
So 10 years ago, I moved here to the United States from Israel for what was, at least officially at the time, temporarily, and was for 3 months. And I was back then a consultant, a freelance consultant to many Israeli wineries, to small importers in Europe, on all sorts of marketing related stuff. And I landed this gig for 3 months with Netofa Winery. Back then, Netofa Winery was already imported by Royal. It's still imported by Royal. I should say it's imported by Royal again. And they were, in their first year since they came to the market, and they're not doing great. And I wanted to try and help them. They were already, a little bit over the edge from that perspective, but it was for the better. It was a Yerida L'Tzorech Aliyah. A couple of years later, so in 2017, Royal stopped importing Netofa wines, and they came back, I believe, in 2019 or 2019, and it's been successful since then, thank God. And so when I was doing this gig for 3 months with Netofa, I met with Morty Herzog, the CEO of Royal Wine, for the first time in the office here in Bayonne, New Jersey. And Morty told me, listen, why are you just working for Netofa when you can work for all of them? This is your home. please join us. So a few months later, I started in my current position.
What year was that? Did you say that you? How long have you been with Royal?
It's been a bit over 9 years.
Well, 9 years. Okay, fine.
Mm-hmm.
And how would you say that? Well, first of all, how did that? I don't even know if I was aware of that. And then Netofa was not with Royal from 2017 to 19. So I'm sure there's some interesting story there. I don't know what you'd say about that. But how have you seen? What have you seen change most? I think in the 9 years like that you've been with Royal.
So it's great actually. The biggest change, besides from a general perspective, Royal Wine has become more efficient, more professional, which is a great thing. But more specifically, education. When I first came to Royal Wine, I was not shocked because I had heard so, and I expected it, but there were very few people, especially with regards to the sales force, who had some education with wine. There are a lot of great people in the team, great salespeople who are talented, and when you're good at sales, someone who is really good at sales, it's a talent, it's a skill, and you should be able to sell anything. And there are definitely quite a few people like this in this company. However, when you actually know the product that you're selling, it takes things to the next level or several levels up. And that's the big difference between now and then. The vast majority of the Royal Wine sales force is now educated with at least WSETIII level 2, which I think is more than sufficient for this type of position. There's a couple guys who have level 3, like I do, and they're great guys, great salespeople, and passionate about wine. But I don't think that it's essential to have level 3 or more for selling wine. But you need to be able to know exactly what you're talking about, and all the essential information that's contained within the courses, the curriculum of the WSETIII level 2. So that's a big thing. And I mentioned WSETIII, which is something that's common between us guys. But there are, of course, a lot of efforts, many of which I've led, that were not as formal as the WSETIII, to educate our sales force, and it's a continuous effort. So I have several things, like I have a thing called GG's Wine of the Week, which is an email that's sent out to the entire Royal Wine sales force on a weekly basis, highlighting one wine. It's a big portfolio of Royal Wine. It's about 1,000 SKUs, roughly, and I highlight a wine of my choice from this great portfolio every week, with a little blurb of a few lines about the winery, the background of the winery, the winemaker, etc. And then not just a tasting note, but a bit more information, something that is both interesting and useful for anyone who promotes and sells these wines.
What was the wine this week?
So it hasn't come out yet. I was, thinking about it earlier. I haven't decided yet which one I'm going to push.
What about last week?
Last week, I'm blank right now. Which one did we do? I'm gonna check that.
I just want to get a feel for it, because I'm wondering how you create it so that, because I always think about, and something that we think about a lot on this podcast is like people, the average person, when they're going to look for a bottle, how do we make wine, even the word approachable is the wrong word, because approachable is not even approachable. How do we make wine so easy to understand and so easy to appreciate and experience? And I'm assuming that's what you do. That's why I'm so fascinated by it.
Right. So the last wine of the week was the Sion Capital Lionsgate. So that's a wine that is quite affordable. It's under $20. It's not mevushal. So in the email that's being sent out, it's also sent out on WhatsApp. So like I said, there is a little blurb about the winery, the background, when the winery was established, by whom, what is the little story there, and then about the wine. I'm gonna read to you exactly what I wrote, so you understand a little bit, what it looks like, generally speaking. So about the wine, I really love talking and writing about these Israeli blends, which combine great varieties that thrive in Israel's Mediterranean climate. Why? Because they are more unique than, say, a straight Cabernet Sauvignon or Chardonnay, however good those would be. What's even better about this particular wine is that it's very much affordable. It's highly drinkable. It's a blend that has some Cabernet Sauvignon in it, but there's also Shiraz and Barbera. So it's interesting. You have a unique blend that combines, Shiraz/Syrah and Barbera. Both can be deemed Mediterranean. Syrah, Rhone Valley originally, Barbera, Italy. Both are Mediterranean countries like Israel, and it's more unique. It's an interesting combination, and it's something interesting that is not just of interest to a kosher consumer, but to anyone looking for an interesting, different wine. And that's how a lot of those sales reps, they sell to non-Jewish, non-kosher stores. They are out there in the non-Jewish market. And a work that's been actively done by Royal over the past 15 years is to really market and sell Israel as an emerging wine region that should be of interest not just to the Jewish/kosher consumer, but of course to anyone who is interested in wine and wants to try something different, something new. So then I go on about the tasting notes and all that. Don't have to get into this, but that's the idea. It's really to convene the message to the sales force that we have some great wines. Wines are actually not even expensive. $19.99 nowadays, even in the non-kosher market, is not a very high number. And those are wines that are well made, interesting, and that can be sold to anyone regardless of their interest or requirement for kosher wine.
Let me ask you about, you mentioned about in the non-kosher world, and I've noticed in more recent KFWs, maybe it's my imagination, but I've met more either owners, distributors, whomever, from interesting places, Texas, specifically non-Jewish. And right. I think a lot of that is probably based on maybe even evangelicals buying Israeli wine. Have you noticed, do you know that there's a major increase in places like that and among non-Jews buying Israeli wine?
Yes, absolutely. So part of the effort that I mentioned before into marketing Israeli wine outside of the kosher bubble was really hand-in-hand work with big chains, for instance, Total Wine, Beanie's, Albertsons in California. They have their pavilion stores where we have successfully, quite a few stores, managed to get them to open an Israeli wine section. It's not a kosher section, it's an Israeli wine section. It doesn't say kosher. And even in some of those stores, you will find, our wines, but also some of those, non-kosher Israeli wineries, like, Clos de Gath, for example, or Pelter. It's amazing. Total Wine, the biggest chain of wine stores in America, has, in some stores, Israeli wine sections. And people who browse the aisles and looking for something different than their usual California/Italian/French or Spanish wines can say, "Oh, Israel, interesting," and it's something that's thrilling because I remember back when I was in Israel, I often got interviewed by foreign media about the story of Israeli wine, etc. And back in those days, we're still like really struggling into passing along the message that yes, Israel makes wine and it's actually good wine. And now we see those efforts come to fruition in a big way.
As we've discussed many times, you and I, the worst thing you see, those headlines that come out before every Pesach and before Yom Tov is it's not your Zadie's wine, Manischewitz. It's like always the same stuff, like the shock that a kosher wine is drinkable, or that an Israeli wine is drinkable. I haven't honestly seen. I love the fact that I can go to Total Wine in random cities and find kosher wine. But I still find them like in the kosher. They always keep them in the kosher. I haven't seen yet that it's been listed under Israeli wine. And I think Adam Monta, if you're speaking of him, I think he's like, I feel like he's made a push to call it like wines of the Levant more than Israeli. Like he's like, it's from a regional and from a terroir perspective, if you want to call it that entire region is a very specific style, and that's the way it should be marketed.
True. And in some stores there might not be an Israeli wine sections, but sometimes there's a Mediterranean wine section where you're gonna find Lebanese wines, Greek, whatever, and some of those do have some Israeli wines. Just like some stores, there's always that's fun to see because it's a big deal actually when you see a wine store that has a kosher section. And say New Zealand, you're going to see Goose Bay or Rimaper sold both in the kosher section and in the New Zealand section. Now, why is it such a big deal? Perhaps it tells more about the store itself, because a shelf space in a wine store should be prized real estate. So having a store place the same wine in two different spots in the store, it's a big deal, and you see that all the time. Like I try and always walk into random wine stores whenever I have time, pass by to see what's going on there, and often like I would rather don't see any kosher wine, just like Barton Moscato, and then I see on the shelf of Spanish wines Ramon Cordova. And that's pretty cool. So it's part of those efforts, and of course, you're going to see this certainly more frequently, in the New York area than say the Baltimore area, of course.
You're killing me, man.
Hey, you gotta start somewhere, but obviously there is a logic behind it.
Yeah, I think
supply and demand.
Well, yeah, I mean, the demand is there. It's the supply that's the issue. It's a complicated subject.
Yeah, and to add to that, there needs to be a focus from the right people. There is of course laws that pertain to each and every state. There's so many regulations and rules and whatever that. That are individual challenges to overcome to get those wines on the shelf.
We want more royal wine in Baltimore. We want more.
Yeah.
And I will speak on behalf of everyone, as I always do. We want more. Listen, it's continuously growing, and even in Baltimore it is. And the interest is there, and it brings me to a different topic, because you hear, when you follow wine news, which I know the three of us do, and I'm talking general wine news, it's constantly doomsday reports about how wine's not selling anymore and wine's not selling among young people. And and we've spoken about this, but I don't see that. And I think there's a protection potentially. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on, how do you see that currently in the kosher world, and even in the larger kosher wine world, versus what you think may happen in the future, and how close do you think it's going to be to what's happening in the non-kosher world? And do you think we have anything to worry about in the wine? I'm not that I'm in the wine industry, but do you think the wine industry has to worry about that?
Do we have to worry about in the kosher wine world? I would say yes, a little bit. still, because generally speaking, the tendencies that that we see in the non-kosher world are usually followed in the kosher world 3 to 5 years later. So when roses started trending in the non-kosher world, it came 3 to 5 years later here, and was the same, Italian wines, Spanish wines, and so on and so forth, sparkling wines. Whenever you see a trend, a strong trend going in the mainstream wine world, eventually, usually most of the time, it does reach the kosher wine world. Now, as you mentioned, there's a lot of doomsday reports in the media. The media is always being, a little bit overly dramatic. It is, concerning, of course. I just read, I can't remember who it was, but very insightful interview saying, it might be the once in 40 years storm, and yeah, that may be true. But again, it's a storm once in 40 years, so it does happen. And it can be rough for some actors more than for others, and it's an easy place for the industry to be. But I do believe that that too will pass. It's probably not going to be easy for a lot of people for a little while. But it is what it is, and I do have some ideas and some thoughts as to how we can try and deal with this situation. But to give you some concrete examples and good news actually. So 2023 was that disastrous a year. We had 21 and 22, just COVID, and right after COVID. That were crazy good years with big boom, huge growth. People were spending a lot of money, a lot of that, extra money that people either actually received or that they didn't spend on what they usually spend. That went to wine, among other things. And then 23 was that brutal post-COVID crash. Which I think is, again, due to the fact that there was like a return to normal on the one hand, and on the other hand, there are trends, generational trends, with Gen Z, with that anti-alcohol / health thing going on, where people say they quit drinking alcohol. Actually, they move to other stuff such as weed, and it's true. And I think that, again, I believe that it's a fad. In the interview that I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, the person who's being interviewed said that he believes that the real reason why Gen Z is going away from alcohol in general and wine in particular is not that they're being healthier or that they don't want to drink alcohol. It's more, in many cases, maybe just an excuse because that they cannot afford it, because stuff got so expensive, wine got much more expensive, but everything pretty much went up in price. Income, salaries have not gone up as much. So there's a lot of people. It's a commodity. It's a luxury. Wine's not something that is vital for most people, at least, to live. So they went away from wine, and from that perspective, I think that's good news, because okay, so we have a generation right now that's a little bit struggling financially, and that's why they're going away from wine. And I believe that too will pass. That will get better. Their financial situation is going to get better, and wine will become interesting again eventually. And the other reason to be optimistic is that, like I mentioned, 2023 was a rough year for the industry. If if I give you, for instance, Southern Glazers. Southern Glazers is the largest wine distributors in America. It's a company that's over 100 years old. 2022 was their worst year ever. That's saying something. And for us, for Royal Wine, it was not an easy year either. However, 2024, which again was not great for the industry as a whole, was not so bad. Baruch Hashem, for Royal Wine was not so bad for us. So it went back up nicely, not crazy, but nicely, which indicates that things are not as bad as they might see. And there is something that we have, us kosher observant Jews, that not everyone else has, is we need wine. We have to have wine. We have Shabbos, we have brisim, we have weddings, etc. And we need wine. Wine is part of our religious daily life, our spiritual life, and that's why Purim was just a few days ago. So it's still very much important. And okay, so the economy certainly does affect these things. So people who might drink a little less, might buy a little less, perhaps might buy cheaper wines. Okay, things go up and down. Yeah,
that specific point I wanted to ask you about, and that and Yisroel and I speak about this all the time. The standard, non-formal wine drinker comes to you and like, what are good bottles I could buy for under $20? That type of thing. That question was answerable even 5 years ago. It's not answerable now. And the other side of that question is that there's been a massive influx of super high-end luxury wines, whether it be from California, even in Israel. And you find starting prices are so high for any sort of quality. It's become like, so maybe the person that would buy wine and has to buy wine for Pesach is still going to buy wine, but maybe they'll only buy one bottle. They're not going to buy a case anymore. And it's getting harder and harder to even point out bottles that are accessible at any sort of like reasonable price. And I think it's part of the reason that you see maybe also younger people drinking tequila, because you could get your buzz or whatever for a cheaper price. A bottle of wine is 5 glasses of wine. It's like when you start breaking that down to the cost, it's not, you can't keep up with it. And I think that is a problem. I think that is a problem that the kosher industry starts to, you face, is that you have to be producing wines that are more accessible, that are quality. I'm not asking for high-end wines, but a person should be able to, and it still of course exists in the non-kosher world, that there's so few options under $20, almost none.
Sure.
And I think that's going to have to be, and I think the other side of that question is, how are those super high-end luxury wines going to be affected in these years where money's maybe going to be tighter for people? That's a two-sided question, but I think it's a problem.
Yeah, true. There's much fewer wines, under $20 that provide that QPR that we got even accustomed to for a number of years, and so it's become a harder question to answer. We actually discussed that privately, you and me, a few days ago, that even though everything went up in price and standards are not the same standards now as 5 years ago, 10 years ago, people are still like not moving so much from that price point. If they were looking for below $20 bottle 5 years ago, they're still looking for below $20 bottle now. They're not upping their spend on wine, and yeah, that's one challenge, and it's actually interesting because I know a lot of people who enjoy wine, who even drink wine almost on a daily basis without spending a ton of money. And during COVID, some of those people they told me, yeah, so we used to buy a bottle of Bernath Chenin Blanc for $7, $8, $9 before COVID, and then during COVID, we started trying all the stuff and trying valves like, I don't know, caramel appellation, Herzog lineage and stuff like that. That's closer to $20, double the price of what they used to spend. And so for some of those people, they actually got accustomed to more expensive wines, and so for some of them, they're not even going back to spending what they used to, because they just cannot drink those cheaper wines anymore. But some of them, backward. Right? But some of them don't even have a choice, and that's the bad news here, is that instead of going back to those cheaper bottles that are not $7 or $8 anymore, they're $10. They just stop drinking wine during the week, and then they keep their wine consumption to Shabbos, for instance, and of course that affects the industry tremendously.
Do you think the wineries got a little used to people buying higher end wine, and when during the good years, and now it hasn't hit them yet? That maybe,
I'm sure it has hit them, but that's the thing. That's the big risk. With the wine industry, is that it's a long-term game, and sometimes you get excited, and even the biggest and most experienced players get caught into this game, and it's part of the risk. So I'm not gonna name any wine in particular for this purpose, but yes, like you've mentioned, there's a number of super high-end wines that just came out in the past 6 months, past year, for $200, for $250, $300, and even more dollars a bottle. And it's true that many of those wines are not moving so quickly. Why is that? Because when they produce those wines, the harvest was in 2021, 2022. That's when things were crazy. People were spending a lot of money. People were really being very enthusiastic and spending the big bucks on high-end bottles. And so they made those wines back then, and then the wine ages in the barrels, the plan is laid out, and then the wines are getting released in 2023, 2024, 2025, when the economy looks very differently than it did 3 or 4 years ago, and not just the economy, but socially speaking, etc. So you see all those wines that were made in excitement back then are released into a very different world than the world that that prevailed back when they were actually entered production.
I'm so curious about this, and this is such a Jewish question, but what percentage of kosher wine is consumed by non-Jews? Like, when you predict a year at Royal, how much do you expect that the non-kosher market is going to buy kosher wine?
I don't know exactly. I think I would make an educated guess at, I don't know, maybe to be optimistic, 10 to 15%, something like that, as a whole, and to some people it might seem low, to some people it might seem high, but there are specific wines, that are very popular way beyond the kosher market, such as Bartonera Moscato, such as Jeunesse, for instance, where the numbers are quite different. I would say that 85-90% of the sales for Bartonera are not, in the kosher market, and Jeunesse and Jeunesse is also significant, not that high, but significant. But as a whole, what percentage of, I don't know, a kosher Chateau Gressac, for instance, is actually sold to non-Jews? Probably a very, very small number. People who walk into a store and don't even, look for kosher. They pick up a bottle of French wine, not paying attention that it's that it's kosher, and the clerk at the cashier is not going to say anything.
I just want to point out, by the way, that for anyone that's listening, that's not watching it, you're sitting in front of a wall of wine, which I thought was a screen backdrop.
It's not a green screen, it's a real wall with real balls.
Just totally threw me off when you reached into it and grabbed a bottle.
That was great magic right there. Backdrop.
Magic.
Right, CGI, like
it's real.
So the kosher wine is still very niche. It's still a niche market.
Sure, of course, and that has a lot to do, obviously, with pricing. It's not like when you buy a pint of Häagen-Dazs. So great ice cream if you keep kosher and you're not Halal Yisrael, so then the kosher consumer is gonna pick it up because it's good and because it's kosher, and the regular consumer just picks it up because it's good. In the case of kosher wine, for the most part, it's the kosher consumer that's looking for his kosher wine, picking up his bottle of Herzog or Carmel or Barkan, etc. And there's very, very few non-Jews who are gonna, so naturally go over to those to those bottles. But obviously, it does exist. And I think that in especially in some stores, in some areas, way out there, like I'm getting every day now. We're in the weeks leading up to Pesach, so we have group chats within the company, and so there's a group chat for the sales force in New York, New Jersey. There's a sales chat. There's a group chat for the sales force nationally. And everyone is sending, their displays in stores, that they push their customers to put up, a wall of, cases of Bartender Moscato and Barn Herzog and Barkan Classic and this and that, and then showing off the pictures of, the work that they do, especially for the Herzog family to Kvel and Chef Nachas. And some of those pictures are interesting. You see like a wall of wine in some random stores in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, and a bunch of bottles. And then in the middle of it, like with no indication of kosher or anything, there's Barn Herzog Chardonnay right there in the middle, a whole shelf of Barn Herzog Chardonnay surrounded by non-kosher bottles. Naturally, in such a case, there's going to be a lot of those bottles are going to be sold to non-Jews or non-kosher keeping people, because it's right there. Oh, okay, interesting. California Chardonnay, price $10.99, and so sure. But those are very specific instances.
So Pesach, I'm going to bring up two things. I wouldn't say we argued about it. We discussed this for a long time. But number one, what do you plan on drinking specifically as Pesach? And you know what my second question is going to be. Why are you drinking that? Because what I'm going to bring up is an argument everyone has every year about especially among, people that are drinking nice wines. And I know it's discussed every year, is that I know a lot of people who drink the nicest wines of anyone I know, who specifically won't drink them at the Seder, or at least not for the 4 cups. And I know you're a proponent of, well, I'll let you say, what are you drinking this Pesach and why?
Okay, so, it's not that you caught me off guard, because obviously I kind of expected the question, and yet I'm not prepared. Usually I'm prepared sometimes months in advance with like ideas. Okay, so for Pesach, this, all that, but this time I thought about it, but I did not make a decision yet. And to tell you the way I do it, and I don't intend to change my modus operandi this year. I drink. That's like the only time of the year. It used to be different, but it's the only time of the year now that I actually drink rosé wines. Is at the Seder for Pesach. I drink. I go by, the opinion that you should drink a certain amount of wine, a certain amount of time, but nothing crazy. I go with the shear of 3.8 ounces. And I have, very nice, like cognac glasses that are shaped like wine glass, and they're nice, but they're small. I think that they hold about, 4 something ounces, and I fill them up not all the way to the top, almost. And I do, certainly on the first cup, I definitely drink it all. I usually drink them all 4 cups, but sometimes I'll do just rough cuts on maybe wine 3 and 4. I do rosé. So I used to do 3 different rosé, and then
Kenny, he's being purposely vague.
Yeah, what's that?
You're being purposely vague.
I'm being purposely vague. I'll tell you why. Also,
he knows this irritates me anyway. That's why.
Yeah. So I'm of the opinion that rosé should be drunk as fresh as possible. That is not to say that some rosé will go the distance and will go beyond 1 year. Of course, some of them do. But preferably, I will try to go with something as fresh as possible. So that will be now the 2024 vintage. Now, the fact is, first of all, the rosé wine category, that's another topic that we could get into if you want. The rosé category is not as popular as it used to be. And also as a result of that, there are not that many 2024 rosé available yet.
That's been the same problem in recent years, is that they're not even getting here on time anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I believe, I think actually, there are a few of them that are available, and I don't think that I've tasted any of them yet.
Wow.
There is the Heidu Rosé, there's the Mata Rosé, there's a couple more, and
of course
and
always who gets here first, probably, right?
Right. So first of all, I have not tasted them yet, and I don't know what exactly is the quality of the vintage with regards. It's interesting, because you can have a great vintage, generally speaking, and then the rosé wines from that particular vintage are not so good. And then you can have a vintage that's considered, substandard, schwach. However, you find some nice rosé, and it's interesting. You cannot rely on the general quality of the vintage for rosé. The reason being that grapes for rosé are typically harvested, a little earlier or at a very specific time, if they are indeed intended for making rosé. When you have a rosé made with the Senier method, the bleeding method, it's kind of an afterthought, a secondary product of an existing red wine, and which might affect the quality of the rosé, because if the grapes are at the optimal ripeness to produce red wine, that optimal ripeness may not be adequate for rosé. So acidity might be off, sugar might be off, for those purposes. So it's hard to say. While again, 2024, from what is being reported, for instance, for France, is not a great vintage in Bordeaux, for instance. Probably, we'll see. That doesn't mean that the rosé from that specific region is going to be to be of lesser quality than usual. And the same goes for other regions. So I'm going to taste those 2024 rosé very soon and make my decision. Last year I did Heidu Rosé the second night, and I believe I did Mata Rosé the first night. So those two are actually available in 2024 vintage now. So those would be on top of my list. And the method that I go by is not just rosé. It's first night I go Israeli wine only. And second night, I go non-Israeli wine only because it's the Seder of the Galus. I'm going with Galus wine. And usually what I do is that for Shulchan Aruch, for the meal itself, not necessarily for the cost that precedes the meal. Sometimes yes. I open a nice aged wine, again Israeli the first night, and not Israeli the second Saturday night. And yeah, it is a good question. Which one? I don't know, but they are, Baruch Hashem, I have a choice. I have a lot of wines to choose from. We'll see.
Why the 2024 rosés? Why is that? Why aren't they here? I mean, obviously Pesach is the biggest buying season of the year. Why aren't they getting here in time?
Why do you think?
Because there's a glut?
Yeah.
Is that the main reason?
It's glut is number one, meaning there's a lot of rosé from the 2023 vintage that are still in inventory. Then
it's just a continuing cycle of because then
right.
24 you're selling old rosé also.
Yeah.
So what is the answer to that? But what is the reason? I mean, because this has been a problem for a few years already. I would honestly, the one time a year I'm probably going to drink any rosé is on Pesach, and it's just not here. It's not available.
Yeah, that's it. So about, I think that the rosé trend, it was a trend, a fad even. Peaked about 3-4 years ago ish, and I've seen the downward trend in the past couple of years, and obviously that means that some rosé wines may not be imported at all from the 2024 vintage, and some of them might have been even discontinued by the wineries themselves, think that their sales of that specific item have declined significantly. They decided not to make it again in 2024 or even 2023 back then. So yes, those are the reasons why we don't see that many of them. The demand has gone down. The supply of previous vintage has remained high. And that's the.
But we know
those are the consequences.
But we know we're going to see them on the market soon enough, maybe in the summer. But then my point is that it seems mistimed to me. Like if I'm buying rosé, I'm buying it. I want to buy 24, and I want to buy it for Pesach, and it's just not here, and that's been a problem the last few years. And it doesn't seem like it's changing. And I feel that's part of the reason. Maybe that's a little part of the reason why rosé sales have gone down in the kosher market.
Yeah, also there's also, because of all of that, there's people care less. So back 2-3 years ago, everyone was eager. We were eager. Stores and distributors and the sales reps were eager to get those 20, those new vintage rosé on the market, because you have to catch that shelf space in March and April to get your rosé on the shelves in the store before someone else those. And because there's less demand for it, people care less. There's not as much competition on that on that shelf space, and people have refocused towards other things. Now, the great news about this, especially for you and me, Kenny, and probably for you as well, Rabbi Yisroel, what has replaced rosé? What's
white wine?
Exactly. Finally,
I see it a lot.
And Royal is seeing major increase in white wine. How about as it relates to Israeli white wine, which is something I always try to push?
Yeah, interesting question. So yes, we definitely see the increase, but where it's actually interesting, and that has not changed, as opposed to the demand for the super high-end wines that we spoke about a few minutes ago. The demand for high-end white wines has gone up and continues to be pretty much up there. Meaning the white wines that sell the best are the ones at $30, $40, $50+ dollars a bottle. whereas the $15-20 is not as successful. Still pretty successful. I would say that anything $20 and up, is doing pretty well as far as white wines go. The stuff that's below that is struggling a little bit more, which I think indicates that the consumers, the people who want those white wines and who got into white wines are people who are willing to spend on wine, looking for something a little bit more complex, a little more interesting, which comes with quite most often with certain price tag. And sometimes it's unfortunate because there are a few wines that are in the lower price bracket that are actually very interesting. I'll give you a concrete example: the Elvia Heranza White, very nice wine, which everything about it is great. The quality. It has a nice label. It's a nice looking bottle. And it is complex, and it can even hold or perhaps even age sometimes for a few years. And yet it doesn't move that quickly because of its price, because it's too cheap for the people who are most interested in white wines, and people who spend usually less for wines like Bernath Chenin Blanc or maybe Chateau Lérigan Sauvignon Blanc. They're not looking actually for those more sophisticated wines. So I'm not telling LV to increase the price.
Please don't.
Of the
we love those wines.
Of the Aranza White, but it seems to be actually the impediment for it to move better is because it's actually not expensive enough.
What about the bubblies asking for a friend?
So that's one of my favorite topics because I'm a big, like Kenny, I'm a big bubbles guy. And I remember that back then when I first started with Royal, champagne just sat. Drapier did not move, Laurent Perrier did not move, Rothschild champagne did not move, and now it's moving quite nicely. Again, because of the general market state of the market. It's maybe not as hot as it was like 2 years ago, but it's still pretty nice. And a lot more people got into those sparkling wines, and that led to increased supply and production from every actor. You see, Herzog came out a few years ago with the Méthode Champenoise, the Brut and the Rosé. You see Psagot came out with a sparkling wine. You see Matar winery, the Pelter, they've been making, champagne leaf wine for years, and if they're non-kosher Pelter label, and they came out with the Matar Blanc de Noir a few years ago. And there is Raziel, from the Benzaken family of Castel Winery. They have two wines which are very nice, but they're not cheap. And
funny because I think that is one area with the exceptions of some of those that you just mentioned, that you find a real fairness, I think, in pricing, and certainly as it compares to the non-kosher world. And you take Drapier, for example. That's an example of a really great world level, international, high-end quality wine that we're not really paying a different amount for than the non-kosher world for the most part.
It's even better than that, and don't say it too loud.
Right.
Saying this, I feel like I'm doing a J. Don't say it too loud. But for the most part, and I was shocked myself. I found out recently myself The kosher drapier is very often, depends on the store, depends on the state, very often less expensive than a non-kosher drapier. And there are reasons for that. I'm not gonna get into here, but it's a big exception. You know, we're used to paying Chateau Giscourt kosher is significantly more expensive than the non-kosher, but sometimes there are exceptions where the kosher cuvée is going to be priced similarly and sometimes a drop lower. And drapier is one such example. So drapier actually those now, you know, like I said, 9 years ago, drapier was a top sell, and now there is 4 SKUs. Back then there were 2 SKUs, so there's 4 SKUs, and they're in high demand. Whenever it's out of stock, there's just constantly requests. When is it coming back? When is it coming back? So that's a great thing, and it's not just, you know, at the high end. You take a great sparkling wine like the König Crémant from Alsace, fantastic. It's constantly selling out. That's like by far and for years now the hottest selling item from König Winery. And you know, even Royal Wine with its Bartender brand, they expanded quite a bit back a few years ago. We had to, like, you know, scale down a little bit, got a little too excited, but we expanded the range of those sparkling wines, the sparkling Moscato Rosé, and Asti, and we had a demi-sec, magenta. So some of those did not do as well as we'd hoped, but you know, we saw that there was a strong trend for sparkling wines at every price point. And yeah, right now, by the way, if you have not tried it yet, Kenny, you should. I was very pleasantly surprised. There is sparkling wines from France under the La Maison Bleue label. Very nice packaging also, by the way. I think that they retail for like, I don't know, $12, $13 maybe. And they're really not bad at all, you know. Great, you know, inexpensive, not complex, but very well made, very well balanced sparkling wine for a very, very friendly price. And that's a great example, by the way, of a wine that also sells nicely to the non-kosher market because they are priced very competitively. They have great packaging again. So when sold in the correct location, they're gonna do well by both the kosher and the non-kosher consumer.
But I think the point is that these are they're very good quality and at very fair prices, and that's something I think, at least in the kosher world, in red wine is getting much more difficult to find. But you could find great quality in white wine, certainly at below $30, many wines, and even in bubblies. There are plenty of very well-made bubblies that are priced anywhere, like you said, from $10 even to just like $50. And it's that ability to be able to access great quality at you know, more economical prices. I think that's probably catching on as well.
For sure. Now, you know, again, you know, if you take the Raziel wines I mentioned before, the Psagot, they are actually nice wines, but you know, it's not easy to sell an Israeli sparkling wine, a product that came to the market, you know, within the past couple of years, at a higher or equivalent price to champagne from Champagne, France, from you know, wineries that have been around for decades or centuries.
I think there are great bubblies being produced in Israel, and like I know it's probably taboo to mention it because it's not royal, but you know,
it's not taboo. It's your podcast.
Yeah, right. The Yarden for so many years has been so great, and that's an example, by the way. It's a little wrinkle on the kosher versus non-kosher. In America, for a long time, it was cheaper to buy that than it was in Israel, which I know a lot of Israelis always complained about. But what a great bottle of wine for such a fair price. And Amazing. It continues that way, even though it's, what is it now, 35, 40? It used to be 25, not even that long ago. But I happily fork that over for that wine. It's such great wine. And
it's a fantastic wine. It's no secret that I've been personally a big consumer of those Yarden and Gamla/Gilgal Brut,
and the Gilgal Brut even more years. So, right? Gilgal Brut, even like they're still selling in the 20s. It's just what great quality, and that's
fantastic.
But it gets back to like I think Israel. Yisroel and I talk about this a lot. I think Israel's real future is in white wine and in bubblis, because just from and that's not even selling internationally, just selling in Israel. It's a hot climate. People want to drink fresh wines.
Yeah. And Israel is the Israeli market, Israeli consumers. Their demand for white wines and for sparkling wines has gone up a lot. And again, it makes sense because they have the climate for it. And that's also why, thank God, we start seeing red wines from Israel with lower alcohol, or a little less bold than what we have seen for a long time, because it's more adapted to the climate there, and we have a younger generation in Israel, which so far does not seem to be affected as much by the Western trends that we discussed before, that get into wine and want to drink refreshing white wines, and they drink rosé like I said, here it's downwards rosé. In Israel, it's not there yet. It still sells well in Israel, because again, it makes sense. It's like hot there, like 8 months out of the year, and they want to drink something that's enjoyable in that climate.
I think I want to ask you. Sure. The number one question I get this time of year, and that is, what wine do you recommend for somebody who gets a headache the day after the Seder? People always say, I can never do my second Seder because I have such a headache. Can you save me?
I'm not going to be PC here. I think that a lot of the people who say that they are sensitive to sulfites and all that stuff, and that they get a headache after drinking wine, they're making two mistakes. One, they don't drink enough water. Alcohol, and that includes wine, obviously, dehydrates. So if you've spent the entire Seder, okay, cup 1, cup 2, cup 3, cup 4, and you don't drink water, you don't drink enough water, you're going to get a headache. It doesn't matter which one you're drinking. Obviously, if you drink a wine that has 15% alcohol, it might affect you more than a wine that has 10% alcohol. And then you might get a bigger headache, the next day because you drank that higher alcohol wine. But again, it's not because of that primarily. It's because you didn't drink enough water. And also, perhaps, more generally speaking, not just at the Seder, maybe you didn't eat enough also. So, just like, balance is important in the wine itself, balance is important for you as a human being in terms of what you actually ingest. And it's important that, our intake comes along. Usually what I tell people, drink at least as much water as wine. You drink a glass of wine, you drink a cup of water. That's like the basis. And then you're out of meal, so you're gonna eat. Don't just drink wine, then have just one bite of food. That's also going to affect you likely, and you're gonna get a headache. So I would advise people before they jump to conclusion that the wine is at fault, or that the sulfites are at fault, or things like that. Try drinking more water and see how it goes.
All right. Well, Gabe, I know you and I have jobs to get back to. I don't know what rabbis do during the week, honestly. Trying to figure that out for you. We would love to have you back on. I think semi-regularly. It's like you have just great insight into the kosher wine, and I hope to see.
My pleasure.
I hope to see you soon. Also,
I also hope so. It's been a while. my supply of Wasserman meats and cold cuts and hot dogs and stuff like that is quite low and needs to be replenished, and it needs to be replenished in person.
I know. May Wasserman live and be well, because I know I always get Gabe back.
Man.
That's a big reason. But really, thanks for joining us. Thanks for taking time out of your day.
Pleasure. And great to be to spend some time with you guys, even if virtually, and looking forward to the next time.
Chag kosher v'sameach.
Chag kosher v'sameach.
Same to you.